Namaste, good evening, and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our class on the Upanishads. Om Namo Brahma Dibhyo Brahma Vidya Sampradaya Kartribhyo Vamsharshibhyo Mahadbhyo Namo Gurubhya Om Shanti 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 Narayanam Padmabhuvam Vasishtam Shaktim cha Tatputra Parasharam cha Vyasam Sukham Gaudapadam Mohantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Mathasya Padmaparam cha Hastamalakan cha Shishyam Tantotakam vartikakaramanyānasmadgurūn santatamanatosmi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Bhadram Karne Vishrunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashye Makshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangai Sushtuvagum Sastanubhihi Vyashema Devahitai Yadayuhu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. We salute the long lineage of teachers, beginning from the Divine Being itself, who transmitted this knowledge to Brahma, the Creator, who in turn transmitted it to the first great sages at the beginning of creation, who transferred it to their disciples, and thus down through a continuous succession of teacher and disciple, again to teacher and disciple, down to the present day. To all of them, our profound salutations. May we hear with our ears that which is noble and auspicious. May we, efficient to worship, see with our eyes that which is noble and uplifting. May we who sing your praises live our allotted span of life with strong limbs and bodies. Oh, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So we are on our third class of the Mundaka Upanishad, and we have come through verse 6 of the first Mundaka. As I've explained previously, there are 3 parts to this Upanishad, and only in this Upanishad, each of the 3 parts is known as a Mundaka. The Upanishad itself is Mundaka Upanishad, and each part is known as a Mundaka, and each Mundaka, that is each part, is divided into 2 chapters. So we are on the first chapter of the first Mundaka, and we will begin with the 7th verse. But first I'll give a little remembrance of what we have done before in this Upanishad, verses 1 through 6, very briefly. The Upanishad begins telling about the lineage of teachers from Brahma, the Creator. And that we talked about the importance of the idea of the transmission of this knowledge, which has been continuous from the Divine Being itself, the importance of the spiritual teacher, the importance of the transmission of this knowledge, etc. And then the Upanishad tells one of the most 2 verses. Then in the 3rd verse, there's one of the most wonderful questions in all of Upanishadic literature. That is, Kasminnu bhagavo vijñāte sarvam idam vijñātam bhavatiti. So this man who's called the great householder, Mahashalo, he goes to a revered teacher, one in this lineage of teachers beginning from the Creator through the first sages and their disciples, and you come to this teacher who Angirasa, who is approached by this man, a great householder, it said, Mahashalo, who asks him, "What is that, O revered sir, by knowing which everything here becomes known?" And so the significance of that question I discussed at great length in the previous class, how it refers to knowing the ultimate reality, which, when it's known, we know the essence of everything here. How through knowing that reality, we know the essence of everything. Whatever we see, no matter how complex, no matter how intricate, we see, oh, this is a manifestation of that reality. It's a wave in the ocean of that being. And so, as I explained in the previous class, it doesn't mean that suddenly we know all languages, we know all of the sciences, we know all of the arts, we know everything that's going on, who said what to whom, where, when, and how. But it means we know the essence of everything. All of that, that which entices our interest, which evokes our interest so much, all of this intricate knowledge, we see it as just a manifestation of this one reality. So it might seem that that would take the juice out of life, so to say, the enjoyment out of life. It reduces everything here to just one thing. But what it's reducing everything here to is one infinite, transcendent, glorious, luminous reality. And so it's not reducing everything to an unmanifest, indefinable, inchoate soup. It's recognizing that behind all of this diversity is this one glorious reality, by knowing which we know the essence of everything. And so, yes, in a sense, it does remove the intense interest we have in this world. It does do that. But it replaces it with a direct experience of the infinite, that which has no end, that which is unlimited, that which is infinitely free, infinitely wise, infinitely aware. And so we lose interest in this because we found the pearl of great price. We found that which all beings have been searching for from the beginning of creation. And so the question is, again, what is that by knowing which we know everything here? And the rest of the Upanishad is an answer to that question. So the teacher, as I explained last time, in verses 4 and 5, he doesn't give an immediate direct answer, but says that there are two types of knowledge. There is oh, I'm sorry, that's what I turned back to see. So the first, let me just get the enumeration straight for the record. The first verse is about the lineage of teachers. It doesn't go on into the second verse. The second verse is this wonderful question, and then the answer begins in the third verse. So the third, fourth, and fifth verses are the explanation of the teacher that there are two types of knowledge. So again, the question, what is that by knowing which everything here is known? And the teacher, instead of giving a direct, immediate answer, says that there are two types of knowledge to be had here. One is the lower knowledge, and the other is the higher knowledge. Dve vidye veditavye, paracha iva paracha. There are two types of knowledge to be known here, the lower knowledge and the higher knowledge. Then he defines these two. What is the lower knowledge? What is the higher knowledge? Lower knowledge is all of the knowledge of everything in this universe. Anything that we know, from sacred knowledge to the sciences and arts and practical knowledges and so forth, anything that can be known through the mind, that's the lower knowledge. Yes, even theoretical physics, even rocket science, even the astrophysics, etc. Everything is part of the lower knowledge because it's known through the mind. It's knowing the modifications of things out here, objective things, which eventually we'll find are just modifications. Yes, in our everyday practical reality that we find ourselves living in the midst of, that knowledge is important. So Swami Vivekananda said that all knowledge with Vedanta is sacred. But eventually we find that all knowledge is sacred not because of its inherent value, but because all knowledge is known through the light of pure consciousness. That's what makes it sacred. And when we know that light, then the manifestations lose their glamour. In the Isha Upanishad, which we have already studied, that was the first Upanishad which we took up. It ends with several verses of a dying soul praying to the sun. Hiranmayena patrena satyasyapi hitam mukham tatte pushan apavrenu satyadharmaya drishtaye. That the face of the truth is covered by a golden disc. And here in the Isha Upanishad, the truth is symbolized as the sun which rises every morning. That's a symbol in many religions of the ultimate deity. And here in the Isha Upanishad, the sun is a symbol of the ultimate truth. And so the soul who is about to die, about to depart from this world, prays to the sun as a symbol of truth and says, "Oh, truth, your face is covered with a golden disc. Please remove that disc so that I, Satya Dharmaya Drishtaye, so that I, the follower of truth, may see that truth." And that's our experience. The face of truth is covered with a golden disc. That is something that looks beautiful, it looks alluring. It attracts our attention, attracts our love, attracts our interest. It pulls out the life force from within us, trying to grasp this beautiful face of this beautiful disc which covers the face of truth. But when we come to the point of death, we're no longer satisfied. None of us are satisfied with the golden disc. If we have truth within us, if we're seeking the truth, we recognize that no, I've been fooled all of this time by the beautiful glitter of life. Now I want to know what's behind that. What's behind that? And so, coming back to the Mundaka Upanishad, it says that there are these two knowledges, the lower knowledge, which is all of the sciences, all of the arts, all of the practical knowledge, all of the inconsequential knowledge of who said what to whom, where the ant went, where the fly landed, etc. All of that is the lower knowledge. And the higher knowledge is the knowledge by which we know that infinite reality. And verse 6, where we ended, I'll just read the English translation. It says, "What is invisible, ungraspable, unoriginated, and attributeless." There are no attributes. That is, there are no qualities, no possibility of describing it. "What has neither eyes, nor ears, nor hands, nor feet. What is eternal, all-pervading, immeasurably subtle, and limitless in manifestation. That imperishable being is what the wise perceive as the source of all creation." So that unnameable reality, ungraspable, unthinkable, indescribable, that the wise describe as the source of all of this. So knowing that in direct experience, that's the higher knowledge. So para chaiva paracha, the supreme knowledge, which is the knowledge of this, and the lower knowledge, which is whatever can be known in mind. And so here, the connection with the next verse, which we're going to take up now, is the last line, which again is, so from that imperishable being, this universe springs out. So there's a connection between the higher knowledge and the lower knowledge, because the higher knowledge is the knowledge of that out of which all of this has come. All of that which lower knowledge pertains to has come from the higher reality, which is the state of knowledge. And the higher reality and the experience of that reality are not separate. That's why in Hinduism there's a tendency to speak of that reality, as being, as truth, as the thing to be known, whereas in Buddhism they speak of it as an experience. So Vedanta says that if you understand experience as the knowledge of reality, then yes, you can speak of it as experience, you can speak of it as reality itself. The Buddhists make a great argument over the use of words, but their use of words is, in the end, no more correct than the Hindu use of words, because they themselves come to the point where they're using words which don't really apply to the reality which is beyond words. When they say that Buddha, the Buddha nature is an experience, the word experience in any language implies someone experiencing something, and that's not the case. It's just the silent, non-dual reality. So whether you speak of it as an experience, as a state, as reality, as truth, it doesn't really matter, because none of those words apply to that which is beyond all thought, beyond all imagination, beyond speech. And so, but again, the Upanishad says at the end of verse 6 that it's from that, whatever you call it, however you describe it, it's from that that all of this has come. And so verse 7 begins to speak about that. So verse 7 says, Yatornanabhi srujate grhnate cha yatha prativyam osharaya sambhavanti yatha satah purushat keshalomani tathaksharat sambhavati ha vishwam. So this says, the first line, Yatha urnanabhi srujate grhnate cha, as, just as, I shouldn't say just as, but as. Here we're getting a simile, a figure of speech, an illustration. As a spider throws out its web and draws it back in. And I'll come to the last line, and then we'll fill in the middle. So out of that imperishable reality, sambhavati havishwam, here this universe emerges. So out of that imperishable reality, this universe emerges from that imperishable reality. As the web is thrown out from a spider and pulled back into the spider. And then there'll be two more similes used. As with grass growing on the earth, as with hair growing out of the head of a man. This universe has come out of that imperishable being. So the first one, as the spider throws the web out of its own being and pulls it back in, so this universe has come out of the being of that infinite, imperishable reality. So that simile, all similes, like all metaphors, you know the difference between a simile and a metaphor. A simile says that this is like that, and a metaphor says this is that. So if I say, Henry is a tiger of a man, that's a metaphor, because I'm saying Henry is a tiger. But if I say Henry is like a tiger, he has the qualities of a tiger, that's a simile. So they're both saying the same thing, but one speaks of identity, the other is drawing a comparison. But both are meant to compare in the different forms of language, different forms of statement, two things. So here, this is a simile, which is saying that this universe comes out of that infinite being as the web comes out of a spider. So what is meant by that? It means that this universe comes out of the very being of that reality. As you know, in the Abrahamic traditions, generally, there are mystical exceptions, but theologically and philosophically, generally, the Abrahamic religions see this universe as having been created by God, but not from the very being of God. There's a distinction drawn between the creator and creature. We are creatures, God is the creator. God makes this universe, God gives form to this universe, but not out of himself. Why not out of himself? Because the Abrahamic traditions, especially Judaism and Christianity, they were very much afraid of what is called pantheism. That is, that identifying this universe with God. And so their fear was that if you say that this universe has come out of the being of God, then God has changed. There's God before the universe came into being, and then suddenly out of God comes this universe, and so God has changed. So you have the problem of a changeable God And you have the problem of now there's God and a universe, and the universe is qualifying God. And so that for them was the problem, that if you see this universe as divine, then God has changed into this universe, and that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable from the standpoint of Vedanta as well. Vedanta doesn't say that God has that God has actually stopped being God and become the universe. So I'll explain that in a few moments, but first let me continue with this line of thought. So the Vedanta says that, well, let me step back again and say that therefore in Christian theology, for instance, the different Abrahamic traditions approach this in slightly different ways, but in the Christian tradition, they solved the problem of having something outside of God that God formed into the universe by saying that the universe came out of nothing. So what's the problem with saying that God took primordial matter and made the universe out of it? The problem then is that God is no longer God. Because if God is the reality, which the Abrahamic traditions accept theologically, if God is the reality, but at the beginning of creation, before creation, you had God and matter, and God made the matter into the universe, then God isn't the ultimate reality. There are two realities. There's God and there's primordial matter, and God formed that matter into the universe. So again, God is limited by the matter which is outside of him and is not him. So I realize that for some of you, this is all philosophical mumbo jumbo, and that's okay. You don't have to understand this philosophically. But it does have significance, it does have meaning. And I'll try to express what that is in what I'm explaining now. So again, the problem from the Abrahamic traditions is that God is absolute, God is sovereign, there's nothing outside of God, but we find this universe. So how to explain the existence of a universe, and God has to have transformed into the universe, and then God is changeable, or God has made something external to himself, and there also he is limited by that which is outside of himself. So the Christian theology, again, all the traditions come up with different ways of solving this problem. The Christian tradition came up with the idea of ex nihilo creation, creation out of nothing. So there was only God. God existed in all his lonely splendor, all of his lonely glory. But God wanted there to be a universe, wanted there to be the play of love. And so God created the universe and living beings, and crowning his creation, he created man, so that there could be the experience of love, so that God could love, and the love could be returned to God from man. But God had to create that out of nothing, because otherwise, if there was something, as I said, that would limit God. But the Vedanta says that's a very clumsy way of going about it, nor is it true to experience. Because you see, the saints in all of those the three major, there are more, but the three major Abrahamic traditions, mystics often saw the God shining through the universe. Saint Teresa of Avila said that she had at one point achieved a state where she saw the universe as a sponge holding water. Just as a sponge is full of water, and wherever you press it, water comes out. So she saw this whole universe like a sponge filled with the being of God. And so the mystics, the great mystics, saw the whole universe pervaded by, filled with the reality of God. And in some parts of Christian theology, and certain parts of Roman Catholic theology, for instance, and in Eastern Orthodox. But St. Thomas Aquinas said in his Summa Theologica, his great vast work on Christian theology, that only God has being, that whatever we see here that seems to be, it's borrowed being. its existence borrowed from God, because everything here came out of nothing. And so if it appears to have being, it's the borrowed being of God. And so somehow they had to explain the fact that there is God and there is the universe and that God is everywhere. But again, as I said, the Vedanta sees the attempts as being somewhat clumsy, understandable, but clumsy. And so again, the Vedanta says that if there agrees that there is one reality, there is one reality, but out of nothing you get nothing. And so you can't make a universe out of nothing, because nothing doesn't exist. It's not that you can make something out of nothing, because nothing is nothing. So how can you make something out of nothing, that which doesn't even exist? You're positing that something has come from something which doesn't even exist, and it doesn't make sense. So Vedanta says, and this, they say, is true to higher spiritual experience. It explains higher spiritual experience better than the Abrahamic model. That this universe has come out of the being of God. It exists in the being of God. It returns to the being of God. It's never different from the being of God. But the non-dualistic Vedanta says that that transformation of God into the universe never really happened. It never happened. That this is all the divine being itself right now. We are mistaking it. We are mistaking it. It's like using the example of Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis, his story of metamorphosis, where a man wakes up one morning and finds himself to be an insect. And the book is about his perception of his transformation into an insect. And so it's as if a person had awakened in the morning, found himself to be an insect. He goes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, I've turned into a beetle." And the doctor looks at him and sees that he's perfectly normal, but realizes that he is under some delusion. And so the doctor tells him, "Oh, yes, this is a recognized condition. I understand what has happened, but take these 2 pills, which are nothing but sugar pills, no medicine in them because there's nothing for this delusion. Take these 2 sugar pills twice a day, morning and evening, and by tomorrow morning, you'll wake up and you see that you're back in your old form." So he realizes that the man sees himself as a beetle. So you can't argue against that because the man is experiencing that. But he knows that the source of it is delusion. And so he gives him a palliative, something just to satisfy him, in the hopes that in the morning, after a good night's sleep, he will wake up and his mind will once again see reality. And so it's said in the Vedanta tradition that the scriptures are like that. They give an explanation of creation, the nature of creation, how creation came about, etc., because we see it. We see the world. We see the universe. We see this physical body. I see myself as inside this physical body. This is me. I'm identified with it. And so if you tell me that you're not the body, you're not the mind, this universe is just an appearance of Brahman, then why am I going to believe that? And so the scriptures give various explanations of the universe because we see it. And because when we see it, we have to deal with it. If you just tell me that the universe doesn't exist, so go away, your question about the universe is ridiculous because it doesn't exist, I'm still left with the universe. And so the scriptures tell us various things about the universe so that within the terms of the universe, we can begin to understand it, and then we can find our way beyond it. We can find ourselves to the reality. But that's because we are perceiving that infinite reality as this universe. So, again, the Vedantic solution to this problem of a changeable God who changes into the universe, or there being God and the universe, these 2 problems of having 2 realities, God and the universe, or God changing into the universe, to avoid those 2 problems, Vedanta says that the universe has never changed, or God has never changed. The infinite reality, Brahman, has never changed. It is the transcendent reality right now. And if through meditation and cultivation of the mind and heart, we're able to sharpen our perception, our inner perception, the perception within consciousness, not with the eyes, but with the inner perception of consciousness, we will eventually see that everything that we see, even if we still see the forms, we'll see them as just vibrations in the ocean of pure divine being. And we'll see that it's nothing but appearances within the ocean of the divine being. So the Vedanta says that what the Christian theology says about ex nihilo creation, the universe has been created out of nothing, that yes, there is sense to that. But it doesn't make really good sense, but we understand the intent of it, because it means that if this universe has come out of nothing, nothing out of nothing remains nothing, or anything out of nothing remains nothing. And so this universe is just an appearance. It's not the reality itself. At the same time, Vedanta doesn't deny the universe, because we experience it. We experience it. And so the Vedanta says that yes, this universe has come out of that infinite being. And so the first analogy, the first simile given here is, just as out of the spider, the web comes out of the spider and is retracted back into the spider. The spider spins out the web and then it pulls it back into itself. So in the same way, this universe has come out of that very divine being. So let me stop again here and say something else about this before we go to the other two similes. What difference does it make? What difference does it make? And especially if, according to Sri Ramakrishna, as we teach here, one can realize God through any of the different religions. So really, what does it matter what you think about these things? Just follow a religion, follow spiritual practice one way or another, whatever you believe, just seek the divine, seek the true spiritual truth, and you'll find it. So who cares about all of these philosophical niceties? It's because it makes a cultural and civilizational difference. The ideas we have about the world, about the self, about God, about religion, about any aspect of reality affect civilization. If we think that the universe is something other than God, if we think, for instance, that the universe was made by God, it's not God, but it was made by God for our enjoyment, then that will color our actions within the universe. If we think everything here, God made everything as a pleasure garden for humankind's enjoyment, then let me enjoy things. Then the resources of the earth, the animals and plants and minerals of the earth, they all exist for my enjoyment. So it's the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, the good thing to do, and the religious thing to go out and just freely enjoy things, because this was made by God for my enjoyment. And we see the result of that. The destruction of the earth, the destruction of the climate, the destruction of the air and the water, the soil, the pollution, etc. All of that results from that notion. Now, let me say also that I don't mean by that people have deliberately gone out and done this. People are bad because they've done all of these things to the climate and to the earth and the water and the air and soil, etc. No, but these things result from a certain philosophical standpoint. And then someone might say, well, what about India? India is terrible pollution, and they had these ideas for thousands of years. What better is it there? It's the same thing, or maybe even worse because of all of the pollution there. Well, all of the pollution there, yes, it is worse there in many ways because of all of the people. But the idea is not that everything in India was done on the basis of the scriptural knowledge. No, it's not that Hindus are good and Christians and Jews and Muslims are bad. No, not at all. It doesn't mean that at all. All of us are in the same boat. All of us are acting from similar ideas of enjoying the world. The idea is that whether in the rest of the world or in India, we need to recognize that consciously, it has to be a conscious idea taught and recognized that this universe is that reality manifest, and that the rivers are sacred, the mountains are sacred, the soil is sacred, the air is sacred, the water is sacred. That was the Vedic view that everything was filled with sacredness, and that there was a ritam, there was a principle of moral rightness to the universe, that the universe was its very construction was according to the principle of ritam, to the moral balance. And when that is followed, then the universe is within balance. We individually are within balance. Our relationship to the universe is in balance. And our life proceeds in an upward trajectory towards the divine being. But if we don't recognize the divinity of everything, and yes, that's not recognized by the ordinary people in India, just as it's not recognized here. So again, I'm not saying that Hinduism is good and other religions are bad, not at all. I'm saying that there is, within the Upanishads, there is a way of understanding the universe which can, if we around the world begin to imbibe it, begin to understand it, whereby we see that everything is sacred, which gives us a spirit of worship towards everything that we do. Let me do everything in a proper way. Let me do everything in a respectful way. Let me respect the things that I use. Let me respect the things that come to me for my use. Let me respect people. Let me respect everything within the universe. Then there's the possibility of changing our behavior. Yes, we still have to use resources because our life depends on it. All animals, all plants, all microbes, everything is using resources to sustain themselves. So yes, that we will do, but let us do it respectfully. There's a wonderful tradition in Native American culture. We won't even say Native American spirituality because it's not something separated out from the traditional way of doing and thinking in Native American, as if there was the Native American secular way and the Native American spiritual way. No, it was all part of their harmonious way of seeing things. That they were not in general vegetarian. They ate meat, they hunted, they killed for consumption. But whether it was a plant or an animal, whatever they used, they prayed to it first, saying that, may I take from you to sustain my life. And one day I recognize that my life itself will become food for others. But to sustain this life, I pray that you that you give yourself in sacrifice to me, that I, in turn, may become a sacrifice for others or for the welfare of others. And so everything to be taken prayerfully, everything to be used prayerfully. So again, it does make a difference whether we see the universe as a garden made by God, but which is completely separate from God, which is meant for our enjoyment, which we can do mindlessly because God made it for that purpose, or whether this is a universe in which all of us are existing together, in which all of us are tied together by the non-dual reality which is manifesting as this universe, and that everything within the universe is sacred, and therefore every act is sacred. Swami Vivekananda said that my ideal can indeed be put into a few words, and that is to teach unto mankind their divinity and how to make it manifest in every movement of life, so that we see that all actions are sacred within this sacred theater of the universe, which is nothing but an appearance of the divine being. Then our view of the universe will be completely different. So, just as the web comes out of the spider is retracted to the spider, then it says, Yata prativyam oshariyasam bhavanti. It's like the plants which arise out of the earth. So there, well, let me give the third one. There are three analogies here. Yata satah purushat kesha lomani, or as hair grows out of the head of a man. So these three analogies, they're given with a logic to the succession of these ideas. The first, the idea of the spider emitting the web and pulling the web back into itself. That's to show that this universe has come out of the divine being. It's part of the very substance of the divine being. It doesn't come from somewhere else, neither out of nothing nor out of some primordial matter. But one could then think that it has come out of that divine being with a purpose, like the spider. The spider emits its web and retracts its web for some purpose. It's accomplishing something by spinning out its web and retracting its web. It has some ulterior motive in doing all of this. And so to counteract that idea, no, it's not like that. Yes, the universe comes out of the divine being like the web from the spider, but it's not with an ulterior motive. And so it says, as the plants come out of the very earth in the spring, when the soil warms, the seeds germinate and plants begin to spring within the earth. That's not done with an ulterior motive. It's not that the earth is thinking, by doing this, I'm going to accomplish my ulterior motive. No, it just happens. It's a spontaneous manifestation of the bounty of the earth, just a spontaneous growth of plant life on the earth. So it's not done for an ulterior motive. But then the idea could be that, but the earth is insentient. It's just dull, dead, insentient matter. So maybe this universe comes out of that being out of some insentient reality. No. So then it says it's like the hair growing out of the head of a man. So a man is conscious, a man is awake, and yet the hair grows out without any ulterior motive, without any thinking about it. It just is a spontaneous growth of hair on the head of a sentient being. And so it's out of that sentient reality that this universe has sprung organically, spontaneously, and without any ulterior motive, which is again why there's the idea in Hinduism of the divine play. If you speak in terms of God, well, why did God create the universe? There's no ulterior motive. It's just out of play. It's just out of the sense of divine fullness that this universe manifests itself. So, again, in the previous verse where we left off last time, it had said that that imperishable being, Brahman, is what the wise perceive as the source of all creation. And here it says, describing that creation out of the imperishable being, as the spider emits and withdraws the web, as herbs sprout on the earth, as hair grows on the head and body of a man without any effort, so from the imperishable being this universe has sprung out. And then in verse 8, it explains that further. Tapasa chiyate brahma tato nam abhijayate annat prano manah satyam loka karma suchan chamritam. So here it says Brahma, and it's using the neuter. So it doesn't mean Brahma, the creator, but Brahma, that imperishable being, expanded. Brahman expanded by tapas. Tapas usually means austerity, or it means heat. But here, neither one is sufficient because it's talking about the origin of creation. And so when there is no creation and Brahman is not a person, there's no place for Brahman to go and practice austerities, do spiritual practices. There's not even a world. There's not even the idea of a world yet. So here, tapas means by knowledge, because the purpose of all tapasya, all spiritual practice, is the expansion of knowledge, the expansion of awareness. And so Brahman expanded through knowledge, or as it says here, from brooding thought, Brahman swells with the joy of creation. So that's a very liberal interpretation. It's a good interpretation. And those of you who have Swami Sarvananda's translation, there are very nice notes that explain that more fully. I won't go into the technicalities because the technicalities are not important, but for those of you who like to know the details, his notes are very good on this. But the idea is that Brahman swells with creative joy, the brooding thought. I don't like exactly brooding thought because there is no thought to the process. It's more through expanding awareness. How can Brahman's awareness expand if Brahman is the reality itself, infinite reality, unlimited? It can't. And so here we have to understand that they're not speaking of Nirguna Brahman, the ultimate reality. They're speaking of Saguna Brahman, the personal aspect of the impersonal reality. That is, speaking of God. Speaking of God. So the divine being, God again, is that impersonal reality seen from the standpoint of the universe. So seen from the standpoint of the universe, that divine being, God, expands through with the joy of creation, swells with the joy of creation. Then it says, tato annam abhijayate. From that food is born. So what does that mean? From that food is born. Here, food has different significances in the Vedas, Upanishads, and in later Hindu thought, but especially in the Vedas and Upanishads. Here, annam or food means that which nourishes. But here it means it's from ad dhatu, the verbal root ad, which means to eat, but it means to eat that which gives us nourishment. And so annam is sometimes said to be matter because we experience matter through all of the senses. But matter has not yet been born in what the Upanishad is saying. It's that the divine being swells with creative joy. And from that, annam is born. So annam means objectivity. First, there's just the divine being. I am that I am. I am. There's nothing else. There's no object. There's just there's a self-existence. But then with that swelling, there is this division within the divine being itself of subject and object, the perception of objectivity. And so that is food. In looking at it from another standpoint, from the standpoint of later Vedanta, that is Maya. Maya is the principle of objectivity. So that divine being, again, seen from the perspective of this universe, swells with creative joy, and from that arises the principle of objectivity, that I see the other, I see the other. And then, annat prano mana satyam loka karma suchamritam. So from that objectivity comes prana. Prana means energy, it means various things, but here it means Hiranyagarbha, Brahma, the cosmic mind, Brahma, the creator. Again, as I've explained many times, Brahma is a minor deity, but the one who conceives this universe into being. So first there's the divine being, Saguna Brahman, that is the personal God, who expands in creative joy and then produces the principle of objectivity. Now there is I and thou, I and it, but actually better is I and thou, the primordial objectivity, the perception of objectivity within the unity of the higher unity of the divine being. And out of that objectivity arises Brahma, the creator, known here as prana, as it is sometimes in the Vedas. And then arises the mind. Satyam here refers not to ultimate truth, which it also means, but here it refers to matter, the subtle form of matter. And then loka karma suchamritam. And then all of the worlds arise, and then the involvement in works. It actually says the immortality that comes through works. That is, the immortality of the limited immortality. It's not actually immortality at all, but the promise of going to a higher world for a long time to enjoy heavenly bliss. And then we have to come back. So what interpreted it means is involvement in this world. So again, I know that's a lot, but it says in this translation, Brahman swells with the joy of creation through the expansion of awareness. Then objectivity is born, And from it is born Brahma, the creator. And from Brahma, the creator, who perceives this universe in his own mind and brings it into being, the mind, our individual minds, the subtle and gross matter, the existence of this world and all other worlds, and the endless entanglement in works. And so this is saying how it is that from that divine being, this universe has come. So let me take one more verse, and then I'll expand this a little bit more, and then I'll take questions. So verse 9 says, Yas sarvagnya sarvavid yasya jnanamayam tapaha tasmade tat brahma nama rupa mannam chajayate. So this says, that being that we are talking about here, who we are talking about, is sarvagnya, is all-knowing. Is all-knowing because it is of the nature of consciousness itself, that in which everything here exists. Consciousness in which everything exists. And so it is the source of all knowledge. Sarvavid, that also means all-knowing. And so in the scriptures, according to Hindu hermeneutics, when you find a statement which mentions two things which are the same, you have to find a reason why the scripture is mentioning the same thing twice. And you have to find a distinction between the two things, because the scriptures wouldn't have said it twice in the same statement without there being a purpose for its distinction. So here it said that Sarvagnya means all-knowing because the whole universe exists within that reality, within that consciousness, that ever-wakeful, which is perception itself, which is experience itself. It doesn't even need an object, but now the objective world has come into being within itself. And so it is that which knows all. And Sarvavid means which knows every particular. Sri Ramakrishna said that God hears even the footfall of an ant. So will he not hear the prayer of a sincere devotee? Yes, he will. And so all-knowing in the general sense of this whole universe rests within that conscious perception. It exists because it is perceived within the cosmic consciousness. And all-knowing in particular in that every particular thing that every being is doing is perceived and known by that all-knowing intelligence. And so yasya jnanamayam tapaha, and whose tapas, whose austerity is jnanamayam, is made of knowledge. That is, we perform austerity in the form of practicing meditation, doing japa, offering worship, and so forth. We do things to do tapasya. Or if it's physical tapasya, we stand under an ice-cold waterfall and practice japa, or we immerse ourselves in cold water to practice tapasya. Anything that generates a spiritual energy is tapasya. But for that infinite being doesn't need to do anything. That infinite being, its tapasya is jnanamaya, is made of knowledge itself. It's just knowledge. There's no need for any action. There's no possibility of action because it's beyond the very idea of action. Tasmad etat brahma nama rupa mannam chajayate. From that reality, which is all-knowing, which is all-seeing, whose austerity is made of pure knowledge itself. From that being, again, we're speaking of Saguna Brahman, that is the personal God, because from the standpoint of Nirguna Brahman, the ultimate reality of Brahman, there is no creation, there is no relationship, there's nothing coming out of anything, there's no swelling. So we're speaking of the Saguna aspect. So from that being, Brahma, the creator, comes, and then Nama Rupa, name and form. All of this universe is qualified by name and form. It's a wonderful way of looking at the universe, and there's not time now to develop it. So I may come back to it next week. And if not, there'll be plenty of occasions in this Upanishad class to talk about it. But let me just say briefly that everything in this universe is nothing but name and form. Name means the idea about a thing. So this book, it has the name book, but also there are many ideas about it and many other words. And so name means all of the ideas which are connected with this. And the form means that which we perceive with all of the senses, what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste. So everything here is qualified, is nothing but Brahman plus name, ideas, and form. That is sensory information. Whatever we see, we can see it as the sensory information and the ideas I have about it, which again is name. And there's nothing in the universe which is more than just name and form and the reality behind, which is Brahman. And so from that infinite being, God, the personal God, comes Brahma, the creator, and then comes name and form and Annam, which is the nourishment for creatures. Here, Annam is used as the nourishment that we take in through all of the senses, through food, through what we see, what we hear, etc. So using the translation here, Brahma the creator, individual beings, us, and nourishment for creatures. These spring from him, the all-wise and omniscient, whose creative thought is knowledge itself. So I could argue some with that, with the details of that translation, but Swami Sarvananda was a great Swami and a great sage, and so he had his reasons for translating it this way. I would prefer it somewhat differently, but I've already explained what my ideas on this would be. And one of the things that he doesn't bring out is this idea of the nama rupa, this name and form. He just says creatures because creatures are name and form, and the nourishment which sustains them. So again, that is the end of the first chapter of the first Mundaka. And next time we will take up the second chapter of the first Mundaka. The second chapter deals with the ritualism of the Vedas. And it starts out by praising the ritualism of the Vedas and speaking of its utility. And then there are beautiful verses about the dying soul who is attracted by celestial beings who come and say, oh, you have, because of your great merit acquired through the performance of your Vedic duties and so forth, we invite you to the worlds of the celestials, the beautiful and wonderful worlds of the celestials. And then the chapter ends by saying that one has to renounce that and go beyond the worlds. So the ideal of Vedanta is not to remain satisfied with the cycles of rebirth, even rebirth in the higher worlds, but to go beyond the worlds themselves. So that's why Swami Vivekananda says in the Song of the Sannyasin, all worlds do we renounce, all heavens and earths and hells, all hopes and fears. So we go beyond all of the worlds. So the ideal of Vedanta is the highest transcendence. So it's the highest ideal imaginable. Is not even to be a good person. We become a good person in order to achieve that, because when the heart is pure and clean, then the mind becomes free. The mind becomes free and limpid and tranquil and able to reflect the reality. So the purpose of life is not even to be good, to be a good person. The purpose of life is the highest purpose possible, to transcend all and become identified with the infinite reality itself. And then as the Untitled Upanishad closes, then we become free and we can travel through all of the worlds singing the song of ecstasy because we have known ourselves to be free. So, again, I rushed through these last couple of verses in this chapter because I wanted to come to the end, because this whole chapter forms a part. And otherwise, I would be stuck with one lingering verse from this chapter for next week with a new subject. But next week I'll try to begin with a little more on the ending of this chapter. So, again, just to summarize, what we studied tonight was to show the connection of this world to the divine being and how this universe has come out of that divine being. And all of this is, again, a part of the building up to the answer of what is that by knowing which all of this becomes known. Because if this whole universe has come out of that reality, it's an appearance of that very reality, then we begin to understand how by knowing that, I have really known everything. So, let me give announcements, and if there are any questions after that, I will take those. And announcements. On Thursday, we will have the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class, as usual, at 11 o'clock in the morning. On Sunday, we will have a lecture on finding stillness in the midst of the mind's noise. That will be the subject of the lecture on Sunday. And as I have said, and as we sent out a notice also, from this Sunday, our services will be open. You can come, those who are fully vaccinated, the 2 vaccinations plus a booster, those who are fully vaccinated are most welcome and encouraged to come back and attend in person. You'll be required to wear a mask for now until the conditions are such that we feel safe without a mask with everyone here. But for now, you can come, no registration. You're invited to come, just show up and have proof of vaccination and bring a mask. And you're most welcome from Sunday forward. And then on March 1st, we will have Shivaratri beginning at 7 p.m., lasting till 8:30 p.m. You're welcome to that without registration. And then March 5th, Saturday, we will have Sri Ramakrishna's birth anniversary puja, to which also you are most welcome without registration. And that will begin at 10:30 in the morning. So, yes. Okay. So question is, how does seeing oneness in everything relate to the universe? So if we can see the oneness which is pervading the universe, then first of all, we see the universe in completely different terms. Right now, we see everything within the universe as separate. This thing separate from that thing, me separate from you separate from the other, and everything is separate and everything pursuing its own interest. But if we see the oneness of everything manifesting as this universe, then one thing is that the universe becomes intimately, which is manifesting as this whole universe. And so we see that I and this universe are not different, that we're intimately, in one sense, intimately connected. In a deeper sense, we are the same reality. And so we feel an intimate recognition of the universe. This universe is myself. Everything within it I recognize as myself. And when I'm thinking in objective terms, I see everything as divine. When thinking in subjective terms, I see everything as myself. When thinking in terms of God, I see everything, myself included, as manifestations of God. And when I'm thinking in terms of the Atman, Brahman, I see everything as a manifestation of myself. And so I see everything as sacred and therefore everything as worshipful. So here, questions. The last line is expressed in Drigdrisha Viveka, Asti Bhati Priya Nama Rupa Nama Eti Angsha Panchakam. So yes, that's true, that in the Drigdrisha Viveka, it said that everything here, there are 5 things. Nama Rupa, that is name and form, as I explained. The words, the ideas expressed in words we have about something, plus its sensory information. But then it says there are 3 other things. Asti Bhati Priya. Asti Bhati Priya, I won't go into that because that would be a lecture in itself. But Asti Bhati Priya are the 3 aspects as we see them of Brahman. Everything has being, Asti. It has Bhati, that is, it manifests to us. We perceive it. It has isness that we perceive. It's perceivable. And it's priya, that is, everything has the quality of dearness. We may think that, oh no, there are many things I don't like. There are people I don't like, things I don't like. But no, that's at the superficial level of the mind. Why? What is it that holds us here in this universe? It's the fact that everything is pervaded by priya, with dearness. And so at the superficial level, we say, oh, I don't like that person, I do like this person. But if suddenly our life were on the line and we were about to be killed, then suddenly everything here we would see that no, no, don't kill me, don't kill me. I want to live. I love everything. I love everything. I don't want to lose this. Suddenly everything would seem intensely dear to us because it is. Likes and dislikes are on the surface of the mind. So that's why as we grow spiritually, we gradually have to de-emphasize all of our likes and dislikes. We have to go beyond the likes and dislikes. So asti bhati priya, yes. But when I say that everything is nothing but name and form plus Brahman, Brahman is asti bhati priya. So there's no difference. But again, I recognize that that could take a lot more explanation, but that is just not time for that. So can we link our own, next question, can we link our own consciousness as a manifestation of the pure consciousness and how to tie it to the form of the chosen ideal? So yes, so how can we link our consciousness to the pure consciousness? How can we tie our consciousness to the chosen ideal? So yes, there are various ways of tying our consciousness to the chosen ideal. Again, the way that we choose to think of the divine. But in one way or another, what are we doing when we are relating ourselves, that is, tying ourselves to the chosen ideal? We are recognizing a link, and eventually we'll see that that link is not a link, but a oneness, that we are intimately connected to the chosen ideal because we are a part of it or we are identified with it, whatever. And so when we pray, when we do japa, we are relating ourselves to the chosen ideal. Everything that we do, our worship is to relating ourselves. When we salute at the altar, we salute at our personal shrine. We're connecting ourselves, linking ourselves to the chosen ideal. And what does that mean from a higher standpoint? It means that we are recognizing, first of all, at a lower level, we're recognizing the value of linking ourselves to God. And then from a higher standpoint, we are recognizing that there is a link between us and God that we want to be conscious of. And eventually we find that that link has brought us to the point where we see that that link is giving way to a oneness in the ocean of love, that love, lover, and beloved become one, and that our consciousness and the infinite consciousness become one. So we start with that which we can understand. I may not be able to understand very high abstractions, which are difficult for all of us to understand. That I am the infinite reality. I'm one with Brahman, which is unthinkable, unimaginable, inexpressible. But I can understand that I am connected to God in the form that I love God. I'm connected to Ramakrishna, to the Holy Mother, to the Divine Mother, to Jesus, to Buddha, etc., and many other choices of a chosen ideal. I'm connected to them. So I can understand that. And that can take me to the point where I eventually can see that I am that which I have been worshiping. Not this, but my inner reality, my pure consciousness transcends this and realizes I am that which I was worshiping. So it's not that I disappear and that remains. No, I realize that that's what I was always. I'm not who I thought I was. So that will have to do for tonight. So I'll give a closing chant. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. that infinite reality is full, perfect, and complete. This relative universe is full, perfect, and complete. From out of the fullness of that infinite being, the fullness of this universe has come. And yet that being remains ever the same. Oh, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the beings of the universe.